And we're now live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this historic Cabinet meeting of the London Borough of Merton. We're holding this meeting for the very first time remotely via Zoom and broadcasting through YouTube. There'll be more virtual meetings later, and I'll go into those later in our proceedings. For the benefit of those that are viewing this broadcast, we will have our elected Cabinet members on screen. But officers will be off screen, but they will be coming on screen as they make their contributions. I'll call each individual Cabinet member to contribute, seek questions from other Cabinet members, and call for directors and officers to make their contributions. Our Democratic Services Officer, Louise, you may hear, will bring people in to speak as their turn comes up. Please do allow for the fact that this is working online, so there may be a few seconds of delay before you're picked up. And so to our agenda. We have no apologies for absence, thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest?
None,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. Are there any dissenters to the minutes of our previous meeting held on March the 23rd?
None, Chair.
I'll take that as approval for those minutes, and thank you to the Cabinet for that approval of those minutes. We now turn to item 4, the Council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, before I ask our Chief Executive, Jed Curran, to go through the operational side of the way in which the Council is dealing with the pandemic, and indeed talk about some of the organisations we're working with, if you'll indulge me, I'll begin proceedings today. So much has happened since that last Cabinet meeting on March the 23rd, it really is hard to know where to start. But I'll begin by referring to the work done over the past few weeks to keep people safe and support the most vulnerable in our towns. This has been an immense source of pride for me and for the Cabinet. But unfortunately, this is overshadowed by the awful suffering this disease has brought to families across the borough, whether it's Rains Park, Colliers Wood, Mitcham, Morden, or Wimbledon. Now, I won't go into the detail of our response to the virus. We'll go through that through the Cabinet, and we'll receive that full briefing very, very shortly, both from Cabinet, as I said, and from the officers. But I personally would like to give a brief update on the situation here in Merton. Sadly, as at the 10th of April, we have lost 64 of our residents to COVID-19. 20 have been in care homes. Our thoughts, prayers, and hearts are with those families in Merton who have lost dear ones, but not just in Merton, those who have lost dear ones throughout the country and globally to this awful pandemic. We also pay tribute to those key workers who have been lost fighting this virus for us, now totaling some 200 nationally. These are nurses, care home staff, social workers, our people, public service people. In terms of the most vulnerable, Merton Council has almost 3,000 residents who have been classified as most at risk under Operation Shield. Our officers have now contacted and supported every single one of those people to ensure they are safe and cared for. Now, that's been done through a mix of the fantastic work of the Community Hub, the Merton Volunteer Service Council volunteers, and of course, our own incredible staff, not just from social care, but those volunteering from across the council. And as the Cabinet members speak, they will refer to the organisations that we need to pay a great tribute to. to the Dons for Action, to the MVSC, to Mutual Aid, and there'll be many, many more organisations that each member will recall and may mention in their talk. Now, I want to thank our teams for finance, from the world of business rates, from those two sections in particular, for so diligently supporting our local small businesses. The economy is very important here in Merton, and we've paid around £22 million. I'll repeat that, £22 million of business grants to local firms to help them through the crisis. And I know that among businesses in London, Merton's businesses were the first to receive these grants. Indeed, today, the Evening Standard carries a story that we're in the top 3 boroughs in London for the percentage of grants we've given out. We've given out 81%, and that puts us in the top 3 in London for coming to the aid of the small businesses here in Merton. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first virtual cabinet meeting, and it won't be the last. The report before us tonight succinctly and rightly summarises the governance position at section 9 and provides a timetable for the next meetings at section 10. And so this meeting will be followed by a licensing subcommittee. This will then be followed by at least one meeting of the Planning Applications Committee in May. I've also been speaking today to Councillor Peter Southgate about a meeting on scrutiny, and he's thinking about mid-May for that, and we'll work towards that. So there is a full scrutiny meeting during this awful pandemic. Now, the annual council meeting, like other annual council meetings throughout London, has been postponed until a date to be agreed sometime in the autumn. That's it from me for now. So I'll hand over to Jed Curran, our Chief Executive. Jed, over to you.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening, everybody. Today is a very somber day. At 11 o'clock today, we observed a minute silence in memory of those frontline workers, NHS staff, social care workers, people working for the council who've lost their lives during the pandemic. I would like to record now my thanks to the work of all the staff in Merton who are trying so hard to keep services going in these very difficult circumstances. We know that a colleague in our neighbouring borough in Sutton sadly lost his life last week, and this is a steady and ever-present threat to staff working day to day with residents. And yet, day to day, staff do turn in, they do help, and they do keep services going. I'm enormously proud of everybody working for the council and humbled by the ability that they've shown in these very, very difficult circumstances. I will mention now the organisational framework in which we've been operating, and I'll leave the detail of all the things we've been doing to future contributors, both elected members and officers who'll be speaking during the course of the evening. In responding to the pandemic, we do have tried and tested processes and arrangements that have helped us in the task. We have arrangements which coordinate all of our activities at a London level, which pulls together not only the local authorities, but health colleagues, police, fire, and a variety of other agencies to ensure that we can best use all of our collective efforts to ensure we deliver the very best services. Underneath that, we have an established structure that works at the sub-regional level. So for South West London, I'm the Chief Executive responsible for coordinating all of our activities, and we have daily conference calls to ensure that we are helping each other to deliver the services. That has worked extremely well, which has meant that at the borough level, we've also been able to deliver our services. It's not just coordinating across all of the individual organisations, we also have to make sure that the various professions collaborate together as well. And I'm very pleased to say that our directors have been at the forefront of working with colleagues. Hannah has been leading on the adult social care. Chris has been heavily engaged with his environmental services colleagues. Rachel has been leading children's services efforts, and Caroline, as the recent past president of the finance directors, has also been coordinating across London all of that activity. So we've been both promoting Merton, but also been at the core of ensuring that services are delivered across the borough. So I'll probably pause at that moment and hand over to the other contributors, Leader.
Thank you very much, Jed, and thank you for that summary. I'll now ask for contributions from the Cabinet members, and I'll begin with Councillor Tobin Byers. Tobin, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by thanking the Director of Community and Housing and the Director of Public Health and everyone in their respective teams. These really are unprecedented times, and the response of our officers in this period has been exceptional. I want to say something about the work that we've been doing to support those in need of adult social care and to support our care providers, and then touch on the Council's role in supporting other vulnerable residents within the borough. In regards to social care, one of the primary roles of the borough over the past month has been to ensure that people are discharged from hospital as quickly and as safely as possible, freeing up capacity in the hospitals. Due to the decrease in the numbers going into hospital, we are not discharging as many people as we had anticipated based on the government's modelling, but we are still discharging approximately 30 COVID-related discharges per week. Our reablement team has done a fantastic job in ensuring that people are discharged as quickly and as safely as they can be, freeing up hospital beds for others who need them. In order to ensure that there is sufficient capacity in the community allowing residents to be discharged, daily calls take place with all of our community care providers to check on their staffing, their capacity, their PPE, and the number of COVID cases that they have. Whilst providers have seen a reduction in the number of staff available to them, as would be expected, and that amounts to about 30% in care homes and about 17% in our domiciliary care providers, there is still good capacity in the system and there are still beds available in our care homes. We're also working very closely with our providers to ensure that they have sufficient PPE and that their staff are able to access the testing facilities that the government has now made available to frontline workers. To date, we have provided approximately 7,300 pieces of PPE to our providers from our own resources, as well as helping them to access regional and national supply chains, ensuring their staff have the equipment that they need. I know that concerns have been expressed nationally by a number of care home providers who feel that they are at the forefront of the response but have been largely forgotten. So I'll ask the Director to touch on our response to and support for our care providers when she makes her comments. In addition to residents in need of or receipt of social care, the Council has also been involved in supporting other vulnerable residents, which the Leader has already touched on. Colleagues will be familiar with the government's shielding strategy, which the Council has supported, as the Leader noted, by contacting all those in receipt of a letter to ascertain what support might be needed. To date, over 800 of those contacted have indicated that they require support to access food or medication, and this has now been put in place through the shielding strategy. The Council has also worked closely with MBSC in the development of the Community Hub, which is supporting residents across the borough who are not part of the shielding strategy. I would like to thank specifically Simon Shimmons from MBSC and all of the voluntary organisations and volunteers of those organisations who have been involved in this endeavour. They have already supported nearly 1,000 families and delivered over 260 food packages, which is a fantastic response. Finally, can I take this opportunity to touch briefly on refuse collection, which is also in my portfolio, predominantly to extend my thanks to our provider Veolia, and particularly to the operatives on the ground who have ensured that the service has continued with minimal disruption. Their dedication and professionalism during this period has been exemplary, and I would like to thank them all for their hard work under what are very challenging circumstances. Well, Leader, with your permission, I spoke yesterday to Dr. Andrew Murray, who is the clinical chair for the new South West London CCG, to get an update from the NHS. And he's provided me with a short message for residents on behalf of himself, Dr. Vasa Nanapragasam, who's the GP lead in Merton, and James Blythe, who's the managing director in Merton. And I'll just read that to colleagues now. Firstly, I'm sure you will all join us in paying tribute to all our health and care colleagues who are working tirelessly on the front line to respond to COVID-19. They have shown exceptional resilience and commitment every day by caring for the patients who totally rely on their expertise, compassion, and professionalism. During these unprecedented times, the NHS in South West London has mobilised and adapted quickly to manage this situation, and we are currently managing well under very difficult circumstances. Organisations have come together like never before to make sure people are getting the care and support they need, and we believe this will continue long after these difficult times have passed. The 4 hospitals which serve Merton residents, Croydon, Epsom St Helier, Kingston and St George's, are collaborating closely, along with other service providers and GP practices, to ensure there is an effective and consistent approach to patient care. This work has been coordinated by the South West London 7-day-a-week incident control room, providing mutual aid and support, and reporting directly into NHS England London as part of the National NHS Command and Control Incident Response. This covers areas such as managing the number of intensive care hospital beds, support to community services and care homes, testing arrangements, personal protective equipment supplies, and workforce. It has also been necessary to take rapid decisions to keep our patients safe and our staff resilient. Some temporary changes to hospital, community, primary care and mental health services are being made to enable us to continue to provide the safe services and protect patients whilst we treat a high number of people with COVID-19 symptoms. This has meant, for example, the use of online and telephone consultations instead of face-to-face, moving the location of services to maintain safe staffing levels, and temporarily pausing some services until this pandemic has passed. Our South West London clinical cell, made up of our most senior clinicians, will oversee any plans for temporary service changes to ensure the impact on patient care has been comprehensively considered. We will also ensure that any changes made in response to COVID-19 are reviewed at the appropriate time and that we have a planned approach to end these temporary arrangements. Finally, we are incredibly grateful for the support of our local authority colleagues who have worked to rapidly increase capacity and provide a higher level of care in community settings to keep hospital beds free for those who need them. Also, in their work through local resilience forums, management of local volunteering schemes to support vulnerable people in the community, distribution of essential supplies to those who are shielded, and making free parking available for NHS staff. The enduring support of our partnership has been underlined by the way we have worked together to save lives, protect the most vulnerable, and relieve pressure on the NHS. Thank you. And I'm sure we would all join with Andrew in paying tribute to all the health and care colleagues who are working so tirelessly under such extreme circumstances at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byers, and thank you for bringing that letter to our attention. And please, if you do see Dr. Andrew Murray, do pass him my best. And of course, we all send our best to all those who are working on our behalf. And now I'd like to turn to your director, and that's Hannah Doody. Over to you, Hannah.
Hi, good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Just building on what our lead member said in relation to care homes specifically, because I know it's receiving a lot of national attention at the moment, and rightly so, as our most vulnerable residents in the borough. We have daily contact with the home as set out by our lead member. However, we've also mobilised an oversight group with our NHS colleagues, public health and care home representatives to ensure that homes with diagnosis of COVID-19 get a wraparound support and immediate response service. That service is made up of public health, infection control nurses, members of our commissioning team, and members of our social care team. The aim of that group is to ensure that the home is supported around good infection control measures, the appropriate use of protective personal equipment, and ensuring that residents who are at risk and most vulnerable are cared for in an environment where their isolation is as much as we can do within a care environment. That has been greatly received by our providers, and we have developed and continue to develop those positive working relationships and build on those on a daily basis. The challenges are not easy within care environments. We have 21 homes in the Borough of Merton, and we have up to 30 care beds in some of these homes. So the challenges faced by both care home staff and our own staff continue on a daily basis, but we will continue to respond. I'd also like to add that we also have financial support to those care homes during the period of COVID-19. So thank you, Leader. I will leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. Very grateful for your contribution. I've now turned to the Cabinet members to see if there are any questions of any Cabinet member to either Councillor Byers or Hannah Doody. Are there any questions?
Councillor Macaulay, Chair.
Councillor Macaulay, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Leader. I would like to ask the Director a question. We have seen in the last few weeks during the COVID-19 pandemic that despite only 14% of people in England and Wales being from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, and 45% of NHS doctors, 24% of nurses, it has been extremely concerning to see the disproportionate toll of COVID, which COVID is having on BME communities. We need to find out what the reasons behind these are. As most of you are aware, both the government and the Labour Party, led by Baroness Doreen Lawrence, is undertaking a review as to what the causes are. Can the Director confirm that Martin will be feeding into these reviews? Voluntary organizations in Martin and members of the JCC, the committee which I am chair, have raised this matter with me in my cabinet role, and they have stated that whether any lessons have been learned in this borough with regard to the Ebola crisis which happened a few years ago, and also can the Director give any advice to the BME group as to what they can do to assure them that things will go well in the future. Thank you.
Hannah, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay, for your question. So first of all, I'd like to reassure the Cabinet member that yes, Merton will be feeding into any review that's undertaken. We don't have any official stats published at the moment in relation specifically to Merton. Once we receive those statistics, we will work with you. We will work with our organisations and the BME community across Merton to understand better how and what impact the deaths COVID-19 has had for Merton residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Are there any other questions from the Cabinet of Tobin and or Hannah?
None, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our next Cabinet member, and we'd like a contribution now from Councillor Edith Macaulay. Councillor Macaulay, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Leader. I think before I start, we need to first of all thank our Borough Commander, Sally Benneter, and the police team for the excellent work which they are doing. The Council is working very closely with the Borough Commander and her team, and also with Safer Martin, so there is a joint up response to crime and community safety issues in Martin. Since the government announced on Thursday, the 16th of April, that the current COVID-19 restrictions will continue for another 3 weeks, our officers have continued to conduct regular patrols to keep our communities safe and to prevent crime. The officers are engaging with residents to encourage people to go home, The overwhelming majority of people in the borough respond positively to this approach, and enforcement is only needed as the last resort. The BCU team are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, supporting our communities in their unprecedented time. Domestic violence issues in Martin has not seen a significant increase, and the DV services remain operational in Martin. There is remote services, but there are no face-to-face meetings. Our one-stop shop has also closed. DV leads from across the BCU came together with Superintendent for Safeguarding to discuss matters around DV and to ensure that each borough is fully aware of demands in policing in their area. MOPAC is also working on behalf of the 32 London boroughs to consider how we may further increase victim support and options around temporary accommodation. We are also awaiting details as to how this can be done. There has been substantial increase in DV in England and Wales, and it is estimated around 100 calls a day in some areas. As we see today, the domestic abuse bill had its second reading in the Commons, and we're waiting for the new legislation to be implemented. Voluntary organization, the council has been working very closely with Martin Voluntary Service. And as Tobin said, I would like to thank the director, the chief executive of MVSC, and also the MVSC staff who have been working non-stop over the last few weeks. I would also like to extend my thanks to the Martin Giving Coronavirus Fund, which is led by Jenny O'Neill. She has done a brilliant job setting up this fund. And so far, we have looked at least 25 applications, and local organizations have had fundings to help vulnerable people. To date, the amount stands at 53,909 to all these organizations who are providing a fantastic service to our local voluntary sector. The panel is working very hard, and they are going to try to extend more and more support to our communities. And we are asking people to continue to donate as the fund is still open. We've seen over the last weekend that there has been lots and lots of activities which has taken place, and we are grateful for all those who have supported the activities, and we would like to extend a sincere thanks to them. And I'm sure most of you here in Cabinet will join me in thanking all these people in the voluntary sector. I've had several emails, and they think Martin is a very caring borough, and we're working hard for our vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay. For that, I now turn to your director, Chris Lee. Did you want to add anything? And please do. Over to you, Chris.
Chair, we can't hear Chris.
Okay, we'll come back to Chris in a minute. We're over to our next Cabinet contribution, and that's Councillor Mark Allison. Councillor Allison, your contribution.
Chair, we've now got Chris. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Apologies,
Chris,
Chair. I don't know what went wrong there. Just to echo Councillor Macaulay's comments, we've worked very carefully and closely with the police in order to ensure they're supported, particularly in our parks and green spaces, to provide guidance and assistance through our staff and through Kingdom staff to ensure that social distancing has been complied with. With regard to domestic violence, thankfully the numbers haven't increased in the way that was anticipated in lockdown. but we're expecting a potential surge as lockdown starts to be lifted. And we're preparing for that and considering the extra capacity that victim support might need in order to work alongside victims. Today we had our online MARAC meeting, multi-agency risk assessment meeting with the police in order to support those victims and identify the support that they need. And I would say that our business continuity plans are working as expected in order to ensure that we can continue to provide a full service, including CCTV 24 hours a day.
Thank you very much, Chris. Glad to have you on with your voice. So are there any questions of either Councillor Macaulay and or Chris Lee from Cabinet members?
None, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Councillor Mark Allison. Councillor Allison, it's over to you.
Thank you, Leader. And I just wanted to cover three areas really that maybe aren't drawn out in the report that comes with this, and I think are worth highlighting. The first is just really to extend to everybody at the council and all of our partners what an astonishing feat of organisation they've been through over the last month. In order to go from basically a standing start to transform the organisation to really be in a position to tackle the coronavirus outbreak in the way that that everybody has done has been astonishing. And many staff have been redeployed to completely new tasks that are outside of their experience. I know that many of you will be aware that I'm spending quite a lot of my days at the moment over at Commonside in Pollard's Hill, helping with the food bank there. And one of the regular joys for many of us is when the bailiff team turns up. And as I'm sure you can imagine, not many of us are excited when the bailiffs come knocking on our doors. But on this occasion in Merton, what the bailiff team has done is they've retrained to be able to deliver food bank parcels to the various outposts of the borough, and that is really impressive. And it's just one example of the work that people across the borough and in the council and in our partners are doing to deliver a completely new service to our residents and help them out at a time when so many people need them and so many people are becoming quite vulnerable. It's also an opportunity really now to highlight the work of the voluntary sector, and I know some of them have been mentioned, but it's worth saying that under the Merton Hub umbrella, led by MBSC, there's a wide range of organisations doing sterling work, including established organisations like Age UK, like Fish, for instance, St Helier, Wimbledon Guild, and of course the Wimbledon Food Bank, and where I'm helping out at the moment in Commonside Community Development Trust. There's also been a number of new startups that have done amazing work that you've referred to already. The Dons Action Group, for one, Mutual Aid Merton, they have done terrific work, and again from nowhere. The resilience and organisational skills of the people in the borough is astonishing. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention, was the organisation that's gone into tackling this outbreak. The second was I wanted to draw people's attention to the extent of our work to tackle hardship in the community, because I think we've done terrific work already on that and gone probably beyond what would have been expected of us. So you've mentioned already, Leader, that we've just been referred to today by the Chancellor as being in the top 3 in London for a speedy response in terms of providing assistance to small businesses in Merton. And that's a very welcome development. It's a testament to the incredible hard work of the staff. David Kepler in particular has led on, and Caroline, the director, I know has treated it as a very high priority. So thank you to them for their work on helping small businesses. But also we're very concerned that there's a growing number of people who are suffering real financial hardship as residents as well. And so we are intending to spend in excess of £1 million on a scheme to provide additional assistance to residents who are on low incomes. We've already got a very generous council tax support scheme that we've been running in the borough for many years, since about 2012-13. We've maintained the high level of council tax support that used to be available before the government changed the system. And so we continue to encourage people to claim council tax support because our scheme is generous. But on top of that, we are also intending to offer a further up to £200 to people who are receiving council tax support. So anyone who's on council tax support and pays more than £200 in council tax will have their council tax reduced by £200. And anyone who's paying less than £200 will have it reduced to zero. And we hope that will make a difference to people as they go into financial hardship in future. The final thing that I wanted to raise with colleagues, just so that they're aware of, is the costs of the council and our concerns about what that could mean to the future financial stability of the council. The government has already announced £1.6 billion in funding for councils. And although that sounds like a very large amount of money, in reality, our share of that was £5 million. And just to put that in context, we estimate that we have spent in excess of £25 million on tackling the coronavirus outbreak so far. Now, the government have just announced an additional 1.6 billion rather, and we're actually anticipating that we'll receive less than 5 million this time around because the share will go to a different set of councils. However, even if we do receive 5 million, that will still be a significant shortfall compared to the costs to the council. So as we go forward, we recognise that that funding from the government is very welcome, and it's a step in the right direction. But we do want them to understand that there have been additional costs to the council, that as a result of coronavirus, our income has also fallen. And also because of the way that we've had to focus so clearly on delivering a better service, it's also meant that some savings and cuts that we might have been wanting to deliver earlier, they may no longer be achievable because the real focus has to be on helping people with coronavirus. So that's a concern as we go forward. It will be the financial situation. It's certainly something that we'll monitor. The government has been very reasonable so far, and we hope that they will properly recompense all councils across the country for the real cost of dealing with the outbreak, and in recognition of the incredible work that our staff and the staff of our partners and our volunteers have done to help residents at this really, really tricky time. I hope that that is a helpful summary of the position and adds to what's already in the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allison. Yes, that is a very helpful summary, and thank you for all the help to businesses and to those on low incomes. It's very much to be welcomed. Can I ask for Caroline Holland, your director, to contribute now? Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, colleagues. So just to give you an update, and for once I won't start with finance situation, but we've enabled nearly 80% of our staff to work from home. So with the laptops, the equipment, so that I think was quite an achievement in a very short space of time, working with our IT colleagues and HR to make sure everyone has the right equipment in the right place and that they can work safely as well. Clearly, there's also been a focus on the main building, which is open to staff who want to come in, and also our CHCH provider to enable them to work with our residents safely. So we ensure that the building is safe and clean for the people to work in. As Councillor Allison has said, and some good news for you, Leader, the numbers quoted in the report around the business rates grants and in the Evening Standard, there is a further update. So we have paid even more businesses out than is mentioned there. We are now up to over 83% and 23.5 million paid out, which is really good news. But we are asking colleagues, Merton Chamber of Commerce, to come forward with any businesses who have not got the grants that they think they may be entitled to, because we may not have all of their details. So we are not complacent with the numbers that we've paid out so far and want to continue to be able to do so. Whilst we've been on during this meeting, we have had the further allocation of the 1.6 billion has been notified. And some further good news, we've got 5.6 million pounds, so more than we had in our first tranche, but still not sufficient with the cost of the actual responding to the crisis. And we're working closely with colleagues in MHCLG and across the other areas of the counties, the unitaries, the districts, to get an understanding of how wide-ranging this impact is, because it's not just responding to the current costs. And as Councillor Allison pointed out, there's also the issue of impact on income, impact on our savings, and then the impact on the recovery. What is the economy going to be like when we start to come out of this? So there may be additional costs, there may also be additional demands, so that we know from some of the people the government has identified as needing shielding, there may be an ongoing support required for those individuals. There's been, I know there's an update on housing coming later, but some of the impact of the rough sleeping, there may be further demands on housing. So there may be additional burdens for us that we will have to pick up. So we're not just focusing on this year, there is then the impact on our future years' budgets as well. So trying to look backwards, because we're in the middle of closing the accounts, what the current situation is, and then what going forward is, and trying to help as many people as possible with the monies that we've got, and also just some of the measures that we've been doing to help people who may be suffering in the short term with their council tax and their business rates, to offer those deferrals there, and making sure that we can pay suppliers as quickly as possible, so moving to immediate payment terms, and we're paying sort of our care providers and that on planned hours rather than actual hours. So again, trying to support them through this to make sure that they are there and can provide the services our residents, and we do need them to be able to provide for. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Caroline, and thank you to Councillor Allison too. Can I, on my part, thank you for being in a position where you are doing all you can to spend the money to get us through this pandemic, and then hopefully the government will be true to its word and reimburse us fully. And to that end, I have written to the Prime Minister, along with other leaders, urging him to keep to their word. We will do what we need to do to help the people get through the pandemic, spend the money we have to, and then we hope that the government, and it seems as though they are bit by bit, but there's still a long way to go, and that was the tenor of my letter to the Prime Minister. Can I now ask the Cabinet members whether they have any questions of either Councillor Allison and or Caroline? Caroline, did you want to come back?
Yes, sorry, there was just a query. So the government has also allowed us to defer some of our payments to government. So they've enabled us to defer 7.5 million of our business rates income that we would pay, and council tax that we would pay over to them. So that's also been helpful in them trying to ease our burden as well whilst we're responding to the crisis.
Good, thank you for that. And I may drop a note to ministers thanking them for that. That's very, very helpful a measure. So back to the Cabinet to see whether there are any questions to either Mark Allison and or Caroline Holland. Are there any questions from Cabinet?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to Councillor Ellie Stringer. Ellie, before you begin your contribution, can I thank you for stepping up and taking over both children's services and education? I know we'll formalise that on item 5, but I just wanted to thank you for being so gracious and for stepping up. Are there any contributions from Councillor Ellie Stringer?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you. It's an honour to take on children's services. Yeah, thank you. I welcome the opportunity to talk about the tremendous work that the Children's Schools and Families Department and our educational settings across the community have been undertaking in response to the crisis. So firstly, on schools, our schools, colleges and earlier settings are currently only open to the children of key workers who cannot work from home and vulnerable children. So that's defined as those with an education, health and care plan, or those who receive support from a social worker. After low pupil attendance numbers in the first weeks of lockdown, since the Easter holidays, numbers have risen to an average of around 500 pupils across our schools in the past week. So that's a big increase since the number in your paper of 290 in mid-April. We have been working to ensure that the vulnerable children for whose well-being we think it is best that they should be in school, that they are turning up, but there is more work to be done here. I myself have personally contacted heads across the borough to thank them for the work that they and their colleagues have put into their quite changed and new roles, and the grace with which they have taken on the many challenges, particularly at the time when the guidance was changing on a near daily basis. I was glad to get back many compliments about the support that they've received from the Merton Council team, who have been in regular contact with all of our schools. Like our head teachers, many of our council officers have seen their roles change completely while still having to deliver some key business as usual activities. This includes things like continuing to support our vulnerable families and ensuring the safeguarding of our children, or continuing to make offers for the 2,500 pupils who are due to start primary school in the coming academic year. So I'd like to thank all those officers for their work on supporting children and young people's well-being. But we do need to mention some of the challenges. So schools have been grappling with ensuring that families who are eligible for free school meals due to their low income can get the funding that was promised to them by the government. You'll have read about the voucher fiasco nationally, and this has affected Merton schools, I'm sorry to report. Some families still haven't received the Eden Red vouchers. That's the name of the company that the government contracted with to deliver this scheme. And we've received some distraught messages from schools who are at the end of their tether in trying to make the system work with very little support from the Department for Education. Schools are finding ways around this. They want to support their families. So they are finding ways to provide food to families. And we need assurance that the government will reimburse those schools who are out of pocket. And as well as providing families themselves, schools are providing a crucial role in advising families on where they can go to get help from the voluntary sector. And many of you have thanked the role that the voluntary sector has played already, so I won't repeat that, but schools are playing a great role in making sure that the right families are going there. And we need to continue this collaboration to ensure that no child in Merton goes hungry and that the right support is getting to the right households. Another challenge has been PPE for our frontline staff working with children and families, not just the actual availability, but the clarity of guidance about who should be using it and when. This has been a concern throughout. But there is some good news. So, for example, our youth services, who could no longer be based in centres and do their face-to-face work, have shifted to some online support, and that's gone well. And youth workers have been on call to be out pounding the streets on the lookout for young people hanging around on the streets, because this was a concern in the early days of lockdown. But I'm happy to report that there have been very few young people flouting the rules in this way. Our team, who supports vulnerable young people to find employment, have had some successes with finding paid roles working on the front line for some of our disadvantaged teenagers, which is brilliant news. And you all know that in Merton, we take the views of young people seriously. So we wanted to make sure that we were hearing directly from children and young people about how they are coping. So our inclusion service undertook a survey and some interviews recently with some of our most vulnerable children and young people and some others. And the headline is, they're coping very well. There are some issues identified, some pre-existing and some new ones, such as inequality in access to remote learning that we are well aware of and we're trying to help schools and young people to overcome. But again, we'd appreciate central government help in addressing those. But however, despite this encouraging headline evidence of just how resilient our young people are, we cannot overlook that many individual children and young people will experience bereavements during this period. And there are some who are having a tougher time than others being locked down in difficult environments at home. We don't know how long this is going to last for. We do know that some implications, like, for example, we won't have school performance data, so our role on supporting schools will have to be based on other data. We also know that as we return to business as usual, there could be rising demand or backlogs in some parts of services, particularly if we have a rise in families in precarious circumstances. So no matter how quickly the lockdown conditions change, things won't feel normal for a while. But I'm confident that we will handle this because our director, Rachel Wardell, and our associate directors and their staff have done a brilliant job of prioritising the safety of children and young people while maintaining key services. They've worked with awe-inspiring commitment, intelligence and warmth, Collaboration across the council is going to be crucial to make sure that all of our children and young people, but particularly our most vulnerable and disadvantaged, come out of this crisis as unscathed as is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you for that heartfelt contribution, and thank you for your work with children and with our schools. I now turn to your director, and that's Rachel Wardell. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Very little to add to what Councillor Stringer has said, but I would like to pay tribute to our schools and settings who have not only opened their doors for the children of key workers and for those children who are vulnerable, but have continued to deliver learning at home, both online and through other means. So they are facing in two directions at once and managing that admirably. I'd like to thank my staff across social care and early help who have proved to be very resilient in the new working from home environment and are delivering a full service across children's social care, so that we're able to take our referrals and respond to them promptly, either by virtual means or through face-to-face assessment where that is necessary. And finally, I'd like to say a huge thank you to children and to young people. So as Councillor Stringer has already mentioned, our young people are by and large obeying the social distancing rules, and if they are encountered on the streets, they are without a fuss going back home when asked politely, and so no enforcement necessary. And our young children, for whom this is very confusing and they just see adults around them you know, under stress and worried, our young children who are behaving so well at home deserve our thanks and applause too. Thank you.
And thank you to you, Rachel, for all that you do for children in this borough. Are there any questions from Cabinet members of either Ellie or Rachel?
Councillor Macaulay, Chair.
Councillor Macaulay, over to you.
Right. I wanted to ask the director, because we had a full governing meeting yesterday, and I wanted to know whether the COVID impact which has occurred this year will have any impact on the school's budget for next year, and whether the government will meet any shortfalls in these schools.
Very good question, Councillor Macaulay. The government has committed to funds for certain specific additional costs to schools through this period. And for example, free school meals payments being one where government has committed to funding in that area. But there are a number of additional costs that we're aware that schools are incurring, and it is by no means clear at this stage that additional funding will be forthcoming. So we'll be paying close attention to that, because schools, as you know, are very tightly budgeted, manage their resources wisely, and this is an unprecedented situation for them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
None, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to Councillor Lakshmi Attawa. Lakshmi, are you there? And can we have your contribution?
Thank you, Leader. Well, as Councillor Macaulay so eloquently reported in her update, I just wanted to echo that, yes, if anything, this pandemic has highlighted is the inequality in our society, which is reflected here in Merton as well, and in the country, which disproportionately has affected the BME community. This is particularly so as the BME community tend to be in low-paid jobs and living in multi-generational households. So yeah, and as the full impact of this crisis on minority communities becomes clearer over the coming weeks, I look forward to hearing from officers and working with partners to understand ways in which we can mitigate against this in future years. And on with regard to domestic violence, Safer Merton are monitoring domestic violence reporting, which is down in Merton, though nationally I know that there is a rise. In Merton, we know that the picture is very different, and as many partner agencies can verify. MBSC have anecdotal evidence of this increase as people are turning to other agencies such as faith organizations. There is a sense that people are not reporting but enduring the lockdown for a number of reasons. For example, they may be frightened or just not able to report and may feel that the services are not there for them, like the one-stop shop being closed. But we know that though they may be closed, they are working remotely and are still open for business. So we need to ensure we're working to make sure we get that communication out to communities and via social media to encourage people to come forward and report and maybe enable them to do so. So I'm working with officers to try and get some phones and to help these vulnerable people make reporting easier for them. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Attawar. I now turn to Hannah Doody to see whether she'd like to add anything to your contribution. Hannah.
Sorry, Chair, nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Cabinet of Councillor Attawar?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to our next speaker, and that is the Councillor Caroline Cooper-Marbert. Caroline, are you there?
I am. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Leader. Can I firstly just say thanks to all of our staff, and especially the ones that are working in my department for their hard work under these difficult circumstances. Our services continue as best as possible. Now, it is great that we have been able to keep all of our parks and open spaces open to enable residents to have their 1 hour a day exercise and practice social distancing easily. And I just want to thank everyone for their cooperation with this. Many residents rely on these parks and open spaces, and that is why we must ensure that they are safe places to exercise. I've received emails from residents actually thanking us for the way in which we've kept our parks open and the way they are able to use the parks. However, there are very few people who are not following the social distancing guidance. And so that's now why we have officers from Kingdom who are working alongside our police officers to ensure and enforce the guidance. For our libraries, following the government guidance, we closed our libraries on the 20th of March, but continue our services online with our e-library, where we have the usual downloadable ebooks and magazines and comics, but we also have thousands of films that can be streamed online for both children and adults. And in fact, it is a good source for parents who are currently homeschooling. And during this time, we've managed to automatically renew all items, automatically waived all fees, extended the dates of all items on reserve, and extended expiry dates of items people may have in their possession. And this extension is now up to the end of June. So if you're not registered and you would like to use the service, it is not too late. You can still register. It's free to register as well. Our regulatory services are continuing to monitor for compliance and are ready to deal with any breaches of the regulations on trading. And come to our leisure centers, all of our leisure centers are closed and GLL staff are prolonged. Some staff are on site monitoring and ensuring that the plant and machinery are kept in order. And this should lead to a rapid reopening process when the restrictions are lifted. So our Wimbledon Park Lake project is continuing. So Chris Parslow is continuing to work on that project to make sure that we meet our deadline. Our sorry, just come down. Okay, so the Wimbledon Park Water Sports Center is closed, and some of the staff have been furloughed, and some are deployed on COVID-19 projects. And then for our theaters, the new Wimbledon Theater is closed, and the construction work for the Polka Theater had to stop in order to comply with government guidance. And lastly, we have the Ride London, which is scheduled for 16th of August. And we expect that to still continue, to still go ahead, unless we hear anything else on the contrary from the organization Ride London. And that is it from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Caroline. I now turn to Chris Lee, your director, to see if he wants to add anything.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to Councillor Cooper-Marbia's points, GLL, the closure of the leisure centres since mid-March has severely threatened their financial viability, and I'm pleased to say that Merton has worked right across London with the other London boroughs that use GLL as their contractor to ensure that there's a viable financial package to support them so that they can come out of this lockdown period and into recovery as soon as possible, because their viability in the operation of the leisure centres is one of the areas that we'll be looking to support communities. The other rather more morbid aspect is around our cemeteries and burials. I'm pleased to say that ID Verdi, our contractor, have worked extremely well in ensuring that we could meet the demands placed upon them. And thankfully, that demand has been far less than predicted. I'll close there, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, for that addition. Are there any questions of either Caroline or Chris Lee?
Councillor Byers, Chair.
Tobin, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if I could ask Chris what impact, if any, the Wimbledon tennis tournament not taking place this year might have on the borough, and what discussions he's had with the All England Club around this.
So the biggest impact is financial impact on the council, but also the businesses in Wimbledon town centre that welcome and enjoy the tournament and rely upon it for a substantial footfall and the retail, commercial, restaurant opportunities that it offers. There is a financial impact on the council. We do receive income, and we're talking to the All England as to whether that's covered by their insurance policy and whether we might still enjoy that. But those talks continue at the present time.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Tobin, for your question.
Councillor Macaulay, Chair.
Councillor Macaulay, your question.
Right. I just want to follow up from what Tobin is asked, because in normal circumstances, when the tennis tournament is on, they usually sell the used tickets, and most of the money goes to local charities in the borough, both Wandsworth and Martin. And I wonder whether you've had anything as to whether these charities will receive any money in view of the lack of amount and shortfalls which local organizations are going to suffer because of COVID-19.
So, Chair, I'll ensure that that's part of our discussions to look at how the financial deal between the council and the All England might be resolved.
Thank you very much for taking on Councillor Macaulay's question. Any other questions to Caroline and or Chris?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. And we now come to Councillor Martin Welton. Martin, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, can I just start by saying thank you to all our council officers in my area in housing needs, Future Merton, traffic and highways, parking, for all their work over the past 2 months. It has been an incredibly challenging time, but they have come up trumps in terms of their work, but also as well their contribution in continuing to keep council services going. I'd also like to as well extend thanks to all our NHS staff, our care staff who work for our borough, voluntary sector, police, and all other key workers here in Merton. They make an enormous contribution to our community, and we are incredibly proud of them. One of the areas within my portfolio is in terms of housing needs. Housing needs demands continue. We have seen a rise in terms of the number of rough sleepers here in Merton to 41. I have pleased to say that 35 of those 41 have been placed in accommodation, and that offers were made to the remaining 5 who unfortunately declined that. I would like to take this opportunity of thanking our homelessness provider Spear for the work they have undertaken with the council, but also as well the Greater London Authority, in particular the Deputy Mayor for Housing, Tom Copley, who has made an enormous contribution in ensuring that this issue is addressed across London as a whole. In terms of the numbers living in temporary accommodation, this is something we take extremely seriously. We still have the lowest number at 198 in London, but it's a trend that has been slightly rising over the past 2 months. We have as well worked obviously closely with them in terms of addressing people who are homeless in the borough. Although our council offices are closed, we continue obviously to have conversations with those people, and if they are made homeless, placing them in temporary accommodation. I move on in terms of support to key workers and NHS staff in the borough, but also our volunteers as a council in giving free virtual permits to them. This is something we introduced early on in March, and obviously we have had hundreds who have taken up the option. It is right that we support them through this time because we recognise there's hundreds of volunteers working across the borough in terms of supporting our community, but also as well in terms of the work our NHS staff are undertaking. In recognition of that, we are also going to be having thank you to NHS staff with the rainbow on our roads and outside the Civic Centre. So provided it doesn't rain between now and Thursday, they should be in place. I think it's something we should give huge thanks to, along with all the care staff, for the actual work they are doing. And I think this is a small gesture from the council to say thank you for everything that you are doing as in our community, but also as well your work in vulnerable people and helping to save lives as well. The other thing I would raise is obviously economic development and businesses in with my portfolio. As it has been mentioned earlier, we are near the top in London in terms of the money that has been paid out. However, there is concerns from the business community, and I spoke to Helen Clark-Bell from Love Wimbledon last week, and it's a concern that is shared across all London boroughs in terms of the current threshold of £52,000. So there is a campaign to raise the beam because there is a lot of small independent businesses in this borough who are not able to access the grants, and they do actually need their support. We do have a large bar and hospitality sector in the borough that obviously do need that support, but also as well small businesses are a lifeline, and we are a business friendly borough which has been recognised by the Federation of Small Businesses. So I am working closely with the Chamber and Love Wimbledon on that matter. There's also been concerns as well about the difficulty of businesses accessing loans from banks, and it's been very much the case that is causing an impact in terms, obviously, the terms they have been offered. Our support as well in terms of businesses is giving rent deferral in terms of where Merton is the landlord. Business support, in my view, is absolutely essential in terms of our work. The other issue that has come up is cycling and walking in the borough. As you're aware, there has been issues raised by the community in social distancing in areas where there is narrow footpaths. So it's something we are looking at the moment. In terms of our streets and in terms of parking, it has been very much directed towards parking enforcement in dealing with vehicles which are parked dangerously and obstructively. We obviously want to ensure that there is no access problems in terms of our road, but also as well that enough spaces are freed up to enable those NHS staff and care staff to actually park their cars. We are, as a council, continuing with essential works in terms of highways, and that includes Bishopsford Bridge. Clearly, some works have been held over whilst we're going to this stage, but obviously social distancing is essential to that, and obviously ensuring that the borough is ready to get back on its feet after this awful pandemic. It's one of the most challenging times I have known throughout my 18 years as a councillor in Merton, and it's certainly a great privilege to see so many staff rise to the challenge in actually addressing that. And we owe all our staff and everyone a tremendous debt of gratitude for everything they have done throughout this crisis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Welton. You've touched on housing, you've touched on some business issues, so I'll ask Hannah Doody and then Chris Lee if they want to add anything. First, Hannah, did you want to add anything, especially on housing?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Welton. Just to let members know, in relation to the 35 rough sleepers that we have accommodated, our outreach teams are working across the health and care sector to also provide a wraparound support in relation to their mental and physical well-being. So it's not just about providing a roof. We're also working with Spear and other outreach agencies to talk about moving on plans and ongoing needs in relation to their housing, but also the support needed in relation to getting people off the street. To reassure members, in relation to the 5 rough sleepers that has declined the offer of coming in, our outreach teams are out there daily making contact with them, and that's really important, because if they are displaying any symptoms of C19, we do need to be picking up on that very, very early on. And I'm pleased to report, thankfully, that out of the 41 rough sleepers in the borough, there has been no reported symptoms of C19. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for that. And over to Chris Lee to see if he wants to add to Councillor Welton's business portfolio.
Just 2 points, Chair, one on parking and one on business. One of the additional benefits we've been able to offer businesses in Merton, or at least the 300 commercial tenants that we have, is a deferral of their first quarterly payment for this year. So 3 months rent deferred to the end of the year when hopefully conditions are better, and that supplements the government support that's been described. And then finally on parking, one of the pleasing tasks we've been able to undertake is to issue hundreds of additional free permits to NHS workers, to carers and to voluntary organisations and individuals in the borough who are carrying out that essential support.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Hannah. Now to the Cabinet to see whether there are any questions of Councillor Welton and either Chris Lee and or Hannah Doody. Are there any Cabinet questions?
Yes, Chair, we've got questions from Councillor Cooper Marbia and then Councillor Macaulay.
Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think the report about the homeless people being housed, I think that's very great news for Merton. But I just wanted to ask a question about maintenance, actually. Under these circumstances, people, you know, I'm talking housing now, are we still continuing with essential maintenance for residents? Because I've had a few queries and not sure whether to push it forward or whether they're on hold at the moment. Where are we with maintenance?
Thank you, Hannah.
Sorry. Apologies for the delay. Thank you for your question. We are in regular contact with all our providers across the borough. Essential repairs are being carried out. Of course, like every provider, they're also having to observe social distancing and not working in direct contact with residents where they can possibly avoid that. But we are assured that all essential repairs and maintenance are being carried out. And I would ask the Cabinet member, if you have any concerns in relation to specific cases, if you email me after Cabinet, I will pick those up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now over to Councillor Macaulay for your question.
Thank you. I think either Martin or Anna can answer this question. Is in terms of temporary accommodation, as we deal with a lot of DV cases, although we don't see a lot in Martin now, but I'm just thinking that we don't know what's going to happen in the next week or two, where the courts have imposed restraining order not to contact directly or indirectly, and the court will make an order for the local authority to provide temporary accommodation. Can either of you let me know whether we have enough temporary accommodation for victims of this nature?
Thank you. Either Martin and or Hannah, would you like to get that information through to EDP?
Just in that point, yeah, we will get that information through you. We've had 3 cases to date in domestic violence, but clearly if issues do happen, and I think we're aware that there will be even more issues after this pandemic, they will be obviously rehoused in terms of temporary accommodation. Protecting the vulnerable is paramount of the work we undertake as a council. And this is something we are closely monitoring, but also as well working with our housing providers in the borough where these issues do emerge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And does Hannah want to add to that issue?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from Cabinet?
None, Chair.
Thank you very much. And so we now come to our recommendation of our report. But before that, I'd like to place my gratitude to everyone who sent best wishes. As you all know, I myself personally had a C19-like symptoms. I'm fine now. I've recovered fully, but it was very kind of many, many people to send their best wishes. But also, I'd like to thank all councillors from the Conservative Party in Merton, councillors from the Liberal Democrat Party in Merton, councillors from the Labour Party, from my Labour group, and the councillors from the Merton Park Independent Ward, for all their work with the community during these very difficult times. We are all working together as one, with directors, with officers, with the public sector, with the NHS, with our care homes, to get through this awful pandemic. And I think it is important that we stay united and work together and continue. And a big thank you myself to all the staff at the London Borough of Merton and to all the voluntary organisations. They've all been named, and I wanted to add my thanks too. So we're on item 4. We're on the council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have one recommendation. That's recommendation A. Are there any dissenters?
None, Chair.
So there being no dissenters, recommendation A is agreed. Thank you all very much for your contributions both to cabinet members and to the directors. We now turn to item 5, changes to cabinet portfolios. This confirms the new position taken up by Councillor Ellie Stringer following the resignation of Councillor Braund. I'd like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Braund for her work on behalf of children for the last 2 years, and sad to see her step down due to family reasons, and obviously to welcome Councillor Stringer and thank her again for taking on this added portfolio. We have recommendations A and B on this paper. Are there any dissenters?
None, Chair.
There being no dissenters, recommendations A and B are agreed. I'd like to thank everyone for being at this virtual Zoom cabinet. As I said, there'll be further virtual meetings, like sub-licensing committee, planning, and hopefully scrutiny. But there'll be plenty more, and we hope to have something around an annual council meeting around the autumn, everything permitting. Thank you all very much. That ends this cabinet meeting for tonight. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.